Yesterday may have felt like a pretty normal day for you. Chances are it wasn't unlike any other Sunday in early November. Maybe you watched some football. Maybe you dug the Thanksgiving decorations out of the garage. Maybe you even got an early start on your Christmas shopping. The point being, you probably spent the whole day going about your business, blissfully unaware of the fact that you were living through one of the darkest days in American history. Like Charlottesville in January 6th had a bastard love child and they named it Despair. For while you were ignorantly wearing your blinders and selfishly outliving your life, the brave members of the Democrat media celebrity complex, well, they were raising the alarm over this new and violent, unprecedentedly acute threat to the survival of our sacred democracy. For that day we have long dreaded has finally come to pass. Donald Trump is back on Twitter. Granted, he hasn't actually tweeted anything as yet, but let's not pretend that matters. Let's not allow that to stand in the way of an opportunity to do an entire day of performative outrage with all of the teeth gnashing and garment rending and wild, overcooked hyperbole that entails. Donald Trump is so dangerous, such a uniquely severe threat to the survival of our most venerable civic institutions, that he doesn't even need to actually tweet anything out. The mere fact that Donald Trump has the option of tweeting when and if the mood should happen to strike is enough to make yesterday, in the words of one honest-to-God professional journalist at NBC News, quote, one of the darkest and most harrowing days in the history of American democracy. That is a real quote, ladies and gentlemen. I know it sounds like a parody. I know it sounds like something out of a Babylon Bee article, but alas, it is not. It is the beating heart of American news reporting here in the third decade of the 21st century. And if this is another one of those times when you are so overcome with civic pride, so flushed with confidence in the continuing rock-steady performance of our fourth estate, that you need to start humming the battle hymn of the Republic in the background as I finish out the opening segment, then I do understand. These things happen, so please go right ahead. For Trump's part, he says Twitter can go straight to hell, and he's sticking with Truth Social, which he describes in typically Trumpian fashion as very, very strong and very, very powerful. But just for the science experiment value of it, just to see how little it takes to make their heads explode, I think he should tweet out, like, a little smiley face emoji or something, just to see if he's got the fake news media so completely wrapped around his finger that they will then spend the next 24 to 36 hours doing wall-to-wall coverage of how Trump's little smiley face emoji has the world teetering on the brink of chaos and disorder. Oh, speaking of chaos and disorder, in a move that wasn't predicted or expected by anybody, really, Bob Chapek is suddenly out on his ass as CEO of Disney, and he's been replaced by Bob Iger, of all people, the man he replaced. So if you thought today had a strangely 2019 style vibe to it, maybe it's because Trump is on Twitter and Bob Iger is running the mouse house. Hollywood is so out of ideas at this point, even the CEOs are remakes. But here's one thing about this. I've heard quite a few reactions, and I think everybody, or most everybody, has been a little bit too quick to take this move at face value as if it's just a simple matter of, well, Chapek went broke and went woke and Disney went broke, so they're bringing back Iger to clean up the mess, but I don't think that's what's happening here. Chapek is not the guy who took the company off the deep end of woke tardedness. Iger did that. He's only been gone since March of 2020. It's not like all the woke bullshit suddenly manifested itself out of Bob Chapek's ass only within the last 30 months. In fact, when Chapek was first announced as Iger's successor, there was a widespread belief that he was being brought in to do a course correction and to rein in some of the woke bullshit, which of course wound up not being true, quite the opposite, in fact. Under Chapek, Disney wound up doubling down on the woke bullshit. They made no illusions whatsoever about the fact that they wanted to position themselves as a lifestyle brand for adult homosexuals, and they think transing the kids is just swell. But isn't that all just a bit too convenient, too much of a cut and dried hero narrative, perhaps? Where Bob Iger can swoop in as the conquering savior and blame Chapek for making Disney the most reviled brand name this side of Toby Jones's good-ass barbecue and foot massage, and he can reposition Disney as a wholesome middle American brand that makes content for the whole family just in time to run for president in 2024? Just asking. We all know Iger wants to be president. We've known it for a long time. He hasn't been bashful about saying it. It's not like that desire went away just because he bowed out as the CEO a couple of years ago. I'm just saying maybe let's consider the possibility that this is how he planned the thing to play out all along. And Jim Eagle, you can hit my tinfoil conspiracy hat music now. Damn it. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where seriously, what the hell is the deal with the proliferation of the Spanish language commercials on YouTube? And doesn't it seem kind of racist that all the ones I see are for household cleaning products? But I digress. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And it's Thanksgiving week here in the good old US of A, as you may know, which of course is the day when we white devil colonizers ritually bathe in the blood of all the indigenous peoples we have taken so much pleasure in murdering and subjugating down through the centuries. Oh wait, I briefly forgot that I'm not hosting a show on MSNBC. I'm not sure what came over me there. Oh, there was a piece of video that went viral last week, to use the fashionable parlance. A uniquely depressing piece of video, which you may have seen, where this woman is castigating her father for being a horrible, terrible, awful Trump supporter during the man's funeral. And look, if you want a quick education on what your kids have been learning at the university that you've been paying out the ass for to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars per semester, well, take a good long look. Because here it is. And not just the university either, not by a long shot. This woman, who, if I'm guessing based on her appearance, looks to be in her mid to late 20s, let's say, depending on which lunatic state she happened to have been raised in, she has probably been inundated, not just in college, but in high school, middle school, elementary school, probably since her first day of kindergarten. She has had a succession of congenitally bitter, unhappy woman teachers up in her face preaching the gospel that says there is only one way in which to view the world and the people in it, and it is through the lens of activist, leftist radicalism. You are required to view the world through this lens and no other lens, and furthermore, you are required to go out into the world and preach this same gospel to everyone else you encounter, including and especially your parents and your family members. So when everybody gets together for Thanksgiving or Christmas, when the whole extended family is gathered around the table of plenty, your duty as a card-carrying young radical is to jab your finger in the face of every unbeliever in the room and tell them in no uncertain terms that if you say one more nice thing about the bad orange man, if you utter one more phrase that doesn't comport with the current woke leftist speech codes, well, you are not my dad anymore, Dad, and you're not my grandpa anymore, Grandpa, and you're not my uncle anymore, Uncle Bob. And so on. In the brave new world of the permanent revolution, heathens cannot be allowed to go unchallenged. All counter-revolutionary activity must be logged and reported. And if these family members don't do the right thing and see the light and start believing in the one true faith of leftist activism, then they are not good enough to have you for a daughter. But I think the most depressing thing about that video, it's not the fact that this horribly misguided young woman debased herself in such a public way because she thought it was what moral virtue required of her, but that everybody else in the room allowed her to continue until she was damn good and finished. That is the worst part, in my view, of a story that really doesn't have any good parts in it. This young woman's father probably loved her more than she will ever understand. He probably made sacrifices for her that she will never know about. And she bade him farewell by publicly assassinating his character and effectively celebrating his death. As you watch the video, as she starts really getting on a roll with the insults and the slanders that she is heaping upon her deceased father, you hear people in the crowd gasping and murmuring and so forth. Clearly nobody is okay with what's taking place, and yet none of the grown-ass men in the room can summon the courage to go up there and remove her from the speaker's rostrum, because that's what needed to happen. Some man, I don't care if it's a brother or an uncle or a cousin or whatever, some man needed to go up and quietly whisper into her ear, "That's it, you're done, let's go." And if she persisted in continuing, then it was that man's responsibility to physically remove her from the stage. During a funeral, personal affronts to the dearly departed, you can't do that. It's one of the things that separates us from the beasts of the forest. But I'd be willing to guess that this display by this young woman, it wasn't the only one of its kind. It's probably just the only one that's been caught on video recently and widely disseminated on social media. I wouldn't doubt that such displays are perfectly commonplace in this current day and age. And they are evidence, very powerful evidence indeed, of the success that modern leftism has enjoyed in its effort to weaken, to destroy, and ultimately to eradicate the nuclear family unit, to create the utopia of which they have so long dreamed, where no social institutions, not families, not churches, not peer groups, not anything, stand between the individual and the state. In the new and better world of tomorrow, the state will be your parent, your spouse, your sibling, your best friend, your lover, your confidant, everything you used to get from other people, you will get from the state. You will own fewer things, and you will be happier. Stop me at any point if this starts sounding eerily familiar. And of course, the holiday family dinner table has been one of the places that they have made into the front lines of that battle for over a decade now, and it's really took on a fever pitch since 2016 for reasons I trust don't require explication. Once the calendar gets to the week before Thanksgiving, you start seeing those articles in all the fashionably woke East Coast liberal publications, your Atlantic and your New Yorker and so on. Take your pick. The articles with titles like, "This Thanksgiving, confront your Trump-loving family members." And I see you nodding in agreement right now because you've seen it. We have all damn well seen it. And there is no explanation for it except as part of a concerted, broad-based effort to marginalize and minimalize the family as the basic unit of human society, which it has been for around 1,000 millennia now, give or take. But who cares about that, right? Nobody who lived before the internet existed had any idea about anything. How could wisdom ever have existed in a world where there was no Twitter and no Instagram? No Wikipedia even. That's not possible, and we've talked before on this program and at some length about why you should never trust people who are all too quick to dispense with the past, to eschew the traditional and the ancient and the dignified, to pull down the statues, burn the books, smash the temples, reset the calendar, declare it day one of year zero, and to imprison or liquidate anybody who is not on board with the bold, new, enlightened future. And we've talked also about the fact that the current prevailing entrenched socio-political worldview, the one that venerates state-centered technocracy and denigrates the family-centered values that have seen our species through over 100,000 years of its existence, the one that's endorsed by 100% of the worst people in the world, is a worldview that comes almost fully formed from the college faculty lounge. And if you want to build a stupid, dumb, unworkable, fatally doomed model of an ideal society, the college faculty lounge is just about the best place to get it. And do we really need to wonder why it happened so quickly that institutionalized wokesterism proliferated into every corner of the society almost before anybody could blink? Because there really is no mystery about it. When you put a young person in a woke kindergarten and then a woke elementary school and a woke middle school and a woke high school and then send them to 4 years on a woke university campus drinking your woke lunacy straight out of the bottle, and then you send that thoroughly indoctrinated young college graduate out to get a job in some corporate HR department somewhere after you spent 15 years filling his head with the notion that your activism has to be a part of you. You must never set your activism aside. Your activism goes everywhere you go. It lives inside your cells. It's like the Hulk to your Bruce Banner. Well, then it's only a matter of time before every corporate HR department in every big company from sea to shining sea is basically a madrasa of wokeness. So we better have lots of classes on microaggressions and implicit bias. We better have lots of sensitivity training. In fact, we here in the HR department have got our plate so full with promoting this woke agenda, I think the prudent course of action is that we need to just start a brand new inclusion and diversity department. And yeah, it all happens at a very dizzying speed once you get the momentum built up. 10 years ago, there probably wasn't a single company on the Fortune 500 that had an inclusion and diversity department. Today, Every single one of them does. And the same deal with the universities. In 2012, you probably could have walked from the East Coast to the West Coast and back and not past half a dozen colleges that had something called an anti-racism department. Today, they all have one. Some of them even give out actual degrees in anti-racism. That is to say, here in the year 2022, you can get a degree in a thing that was not even recognized as an academic discipline, and rightly so, as recently as the year 2010. And this all has the effect of totally devaluing the whole concept of higher education when we keep churning out university graduates who can't tell their ass from a hole in the ground, who evince no useful real-world skills of which to speak, but they can tell you all about systemic racism and white privilege. And speaking of that, I think it's only fitting that we close tonight with a shout out to one of the people most directly responsible for the intellectual rot in American education. Everybody's favorite magenta-haired psychopath fake journalist and fake college professor Nikole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times, distinguished author of the 1619 Project and various other loads of laughable pseudo-intellectual rubbish. So, a woman in New York City, an Asian American woman, the mother of a young son, she and her kid had a frightening experience riding on the subway the other day, and she posted about it on Twitter, about how there were homeless people smoking crack in the one car, and then they moved to another car, and there were some people having sex on that one. And this woman was traumatized, rightly so, that she and her kid had to deal with all this human depravity when they were just trying to ride home for some reason that can only be guessed. Nikole Hannah-Jones decided to start mocking and trolling this woman, just out of left field, like it was so incredibly stupid that she should be bothered by public crack smoking and copulation on the subway train. Oh, get over it, girlfriend. This is New York City. Stop being such a pussy. Pfft. And she keeps going and going and going, just attacking this poor woman relentlessly, tweet after nasty-ass tweet, to the point where a disinterested third party has little choice but to conclude, this all seems pretty racist. Oh, but we're not supposed to talk about that, are we? We are not supposed to notice the endemic, almost casual racism that affluent black leftist elites display toward middle and working class Asian Americans. And it would be one thing if Nikole Hannah-Jones was just a dumb, racist, hypocrite piece of shit. But it's worse than that, because Nikole Hannah-Jones has built an entire career and a not inconsiderable fortune out of calling herself anti-racist and aligning with a movement that calls itself anti-racism. And I'm just saying that it seems to me, though I ain't got no fancy book learning or no fancy college degree, that acting like a racist asshole is a strange way of asserting one's anti-racist street cred. But maybe she can think about that tonight as her chauffeur drives her home to her tastefully furnished Upper East Side penthouse, while she jots down notes for her next column on how terribly difficult it is being a marginalized black woman in the United States of America. Thank you very much indeed for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate more than I can express. I will be back Wednesday for a very special Thanksgiving Eve edition of the program. Until then, here is wishing everyone a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.